find the full names again.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is the last event in this Brazilian Day here at WWF Pavilion. We are super happy of hosting this last event here. And I would like to say thank you for all the people here, and especially from my colleagues from WWF Brazil, because we have been organizing this whole day here at the pavilion. So thank you, and I will pass to Devin, our moderator, to start the event. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. It is late night. I know everybody is tired, and we are almost at the end of the negotiations. So we have four panelists here. We have Lilian Beatriz from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, and she is the director of the climate department there, and she is also the deputy head of the mission in here. We have Martina Donlan here, and she is the lead climate communications expert in the United Nations, and she has been around for a long time, I guess. Like many COP people know her very well. She's one of the champions of the climate communications. And we have Alex Murray. He's from Conscious Advertising Network. Conscious Advertising Network is one of the innovative civil society organizations which is dedicated to have sustainable advertising, which is a very hard task, if you ask me. And we have also a Brazilian champion of information integrity, Thais from Fala. And we will mostly today talk about information integrity and the role of protecting information integrity for boosting and ambitious climate action. But we will also talk about a very new initiative that was launched yesterday in Brazil by the leadership of Brazil, UNICEF, and United Nations. So I will start from that initiative, and my first question would be to Beatriz and Martina. And can you a little bit explain about what is that initiative and what was the motives behind setting up that initiative?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, the WWF, for keep inviting me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to come to this pavilion here, and they keep inviting me. It's really nice. I have been listening very interesting discussions here. Well, the question of disinformation regarding climate change is a global problem, and Brazil sees it with lots of concern because we are witnessing a rise in the level of disinformation about climate change, and this disinformation seeks not only to deny the scientific consensus around this issue, but also to discredit evidence-based policies. And as you know, all the work that these negotiations do here, it's based on science, on the best available science, on the works of scientists and the reports of the IPCC. So to keep this as a base is essential. And it concerns us that this sometimes is questioned. So the IPCC itself has recognized that the deliberate undermining of science is contributing to misperceptions of the scientific consensus regarding climate change. So the reading of these scenarios led Brazil to build, in partnership with the United Nations and UNESCO, the Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change. Um, this initiative has been being constructed with our UN partners for some months. And we had a meeting in New York at the margins of the General Assembly to present informally the initiative to some countries. The response was very positive. So we kept going, and a more formal launch happened yesterday at the G20 leaders meeting that took place in Rio de Janeiro, with the presence of the UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay, and the Minister for Communications within the Presidency of Brazil. They launched this yesterday. So this initiative it's a partnership of countries and in the future we hope other stakeholders. Also the international organizations that I mentioned. And the goal is to promote and defend information integrity regarding climate change through funding for research, strategic action, advocacy, and diplomacy. So we wanted to promote information integrity related to climate change. We want to fund research, especially from the Global South, and fight disinformation, supporting one of the means to do that is to support existing campaigns in this direction. The Initiative for Information Integrity also wants to mitigate and counter climate disinformation, particularly before COP30 and between now and COP30. These actions will be guided by a steering committee and will be financed by a global fund. We are very enthusiastic that entities like the UNFCCC and UNEP are considering to be in the steering committee, and we hope they will confirm this participation very soon. Also, this fund, it's a global fund, would be administered and implemented by UNESCO, and we rely on voluntary contributions and will not tie the use of resources to specific donations. The initial goal is to raise $15 million. A number of countries already manifested the intention to join the initiative. We have up to now Chile, Denmark, France, Morocco, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. And we are in the process of inviting others. Now, we were waiting a little bit more than this formal launch yesterday, and now it's out in the world, and we want other countries to join and be partners in this initiative. And we will be doing, events, seminars, and have, this lots of visibility to this initiative towards COP30 and in COP30. I will stop by now. I can come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, thanks very much. And we are very grateful to Brazil for its leadership on this issue, not only getting the issue of disinformation into a G20 leaders declaration for the first time, but also launching this initiative together with UNESCO and us, the United Nations. It's really a first of its kind coalition, as you mentioned, amongst states and multilateral entities. The UNFCCC has joined, the World Meteorological Organization has joined, OECD has joined, and the 6 countries from the 3 continents that you mentioned. So truly a global effort that we're really excited about. And I think it is to build that network, to move together in that same direction, to really take on the coordinated disinformation campaigns that have been out there for decades, stalling action, putting up hurdles and delays and distractions to the urgent action that we need to see on this topic. So the funding for research will give us more insights that will allow us to have better campaigns, more strategic action, and hopefully take on the issue of disinformation.
Thank you, Martina. I will return to Alex and Thais. Actually, As Martin and Lilium said, climate disinformation like CO2, as CO2 pollutes our ecosystem, climate disinformation pollutes our information ecosystem. So it's kind of a pollution we are facing. I just want to learn from Alex and Thais about how does this pollution impact climate action and public discourse, and what are the examples you have seen in the past about how climate disinformation derail climate action, and lastly, what are the broader social consequences of climate disinformation beyond climate action?
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, that's okay. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about what we've been working in Brazil for the past 4 years. We've been showing the cost of climate disinformation, socio-environmental issues, and hate speech in Brazil. When you're talking about climate disinformation, and I remember when we began, it wasn't something like important, I could say, and I'm really glad that that changed, and we had such a huge movement leading Brazil. Climate disinformation is designed to delay the action and distorting the truth, and also creating new fears. When you have new fears that don't exist, you don't need to fear climate change. And a striking example occurred this year in Brazil, where we had historic floods in Rio Grande do Sul that led to hundreds of cities in crisis. Yet the social media buzzed with claims that Madonna caused the rains. Yes, Madonna, the musician, yeah, and through a satanic ritual. And this could be something like funny, we could say, but this show how the disinformation is designed to spark attention and grab important conversations. And that way we are doing and try to create new narratives and change the scenario with strategic communications and new products telling the cost of lies. And that's why I call this a new supply chain of our era. It's the supply chain of lies.
Thank you, Thais. And as you say, you know, some of the examples are ridiculous to the point where you can't believe that people believe them, but the cost of those makes it very real and very damaging. From our experience, and I've been involved with colleagues in working on tackling disinformation since in the run-up to COP26. So amongst me and Thais, there's groups and well, there's over 60 groups who are part of the climate action against disinformation from all around the world who have been working towards this. And in terms of the impacts that we've seen, that we charted, you know, it is, quite frankly, it obstructs climate action, the ability for groups to be negotiating here when you're contending with misinformation and disinformation about, you know, the kind of initiatives that might be going on at home or that might be happening on a global level. We've seen how it deepens division and how often groups are trying to actually co-opt other different areas of social divides into their campaigns. We're seeing how groups are increasingly using issues like gender, far right kind of co-opting the climate movement and things like that. So it's not just about climate. There's broader things that they're trying to open divisions around and coordinate across. Reducing trust as well. If you're able to say, yeah, maybe you can't trust us, but you can't trust them as well, then that increases the difficulty, whether that's with peacekeepers. And there was an internal survey run by the UN, I think it was in 2021, where it was found that 75% of peacekeepers felt that it had affected their ability to operate. So trust in institutions is really critical at a time when that's so important for action, and obstructs progress at the kind of multilateral level as well. And you cited the floods in Brazil, but we've seen it more recently with the floods in Spain and misinformation that was happening there about rescue efforts. We saw it with the hurricanes in the US and in the Caribbean. And so, yeah, it has devastating impacts. And I think when we walked around and spoke with delegates in COP26 in Glasgow, people were saying, oh, that's fake news, right? You're talking about fake news. Yeah, we know about that. That's what Trump talks about. Doesn't affect us. No, we don't have that here. And I think now when we talk to people, there isn't a single person who hasn't gone, oh yeah, it's such an issue. So I think that has changed and it's accelerated, but that's why this is so important that we have some solutions where we're not just trying to create them one by one, country by country, but across is really key.
Thank you, Alex. I will return to Lilian. We know that this initiative is a groundbreaking. It's a first of its kind. This is the first time that governments in multilateral platform addressing this issue and planning to tackle. And I would like to thank you for Brazil to lead this. And this also shows how Brazil is committed to fight climate disinformation. And at the same time, I see everybody here almost are very excited about whoever I talk as excited about COP Brazil, and everybody see the COP Brazil as the milestone moment for ramping up climate action. So, in terms of climate disinformation, what we should be expecting from Brazil in COP next year? Should we expect that we will be discussing this issue as a part of the negotiations or as a part of COP? What are the plans of Brazil to further elaborate this fight?
Thank you. Well, to put this as agenda item without an agenda fight, we'll have to be very strategic. But what we're thinking, as you know, we have all this agenda action, coming here and circulating in these pavilions. What's happening in these pavilions is more dynamic and maybe more promising than what's happening in the negotiation rooms. And we have to accept that climate change has become such a real problem affecting real places and real people, that it's not only a matter for governments to take over. It's a matter to, it's a whole of society approach to the solutions, to the action. It's really important. We are shifting, from one model to the other. So what we see that we hope to have many more countries entering the initiative, supporting the initiative. We will grow our partnership with the UN entities that are partnering with us. All these will be done under human rights UN-based principles. And so we hope to have in 1 year time much more people involved, maybe some new research released, and then we will see how we are going to present this work and engage more people, not only governments. It's very important that non-state actors come along, and the platforms, the information platforms, the vehicles, the social media, the vehicles for this fake news, they should be part of the discussion and part of the solution. So because we launched this initiative, because the Undersecretary for Global Communications of the UN, Melissa Fleming, she's on board, and we will have advanced, hopefully, more the fund running, more countries, and we will present the first results of what we can expect for this agenda.
Thank you, William. I will return to Martina, and I will ask a little bit more broader question. We know that UN has been fighting in many fronts of disinformation, and sometimes UN is the target of disinformation. And in last year, there were a couple of initiatives UN started. Can you a little bit mention about all the other initiatives that UN has been leading in terms of fighting disinformation and the pollution in the information ecosystem?
Yeah, we are very committed to this fight because, as Alex alluded to, it really impacts our work. The lack of trust in science, the lack of trust in institutions undermines everything we're working for, be it a climate action, be it human rights, be it vaccines and healthcare. We are seeing the same disinformation groups pivot from one issue to the other using the same kinds of tactics and strategies, undermining trust in science and trust in institutions. It's hurting us, in terms of the issues we're working for, and it's hurting us sometimes even on the ground, as you mentioned, Alex, with peacekeeping, when peacekeepers are, victims of attacks and harassment. So what have we done to tackle this issue? Well, so apart from this new initiative, we've also released the UN Global Principles for Information Integrity back in June this year, which really sets a framework for action and for governments, for tech platforms, for civil society, and it sets out, and for member states as well, sets out some concrete recommendations of how we see this issue, to be solved. We've also, the member states have adopted the Global Digital Compact this September at the United Nations as part of the Summit of the Future. The Digital Compact calls for an assessment of how disinformation is affecting the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, one of which is climate action. So all of these frameworks, they help push this along, and I think it will all come together in this new initiative that's really an unprecedented coalition pulling in the same direction.
Thank you. And I will ask Thais, because Thais has been working on digital space and digital ecosystem for a long time, and the way we perceive information has changed a lot. I remember the times when we didn't have cell phones. I know I am one of the old people, remaining old people here. But like we see World Economic Forum report talks about disinformation. We see UN takes action. We see Brazil is taking bold action here. But what about the actors in the ecosystem? What do you see? What do you think about the digital platforms and their role? And do you think that they are doing enough, or do we need progress there?
Yeah, first I think it's like seeing everything we see here at COP and as a part of G20, we need to work together. So, and I'd like always when you're talking about climate information, I think it's important to show the cost on the global level, on the national level, and in the territories. Because inside of the territories, traditional communities, indigenous communities, it's mean division, death, and treating. So when you are, and we talked a lot with the platforms, we need more transparency. We need to think about monetization on climate information, because every time we allow something that, and for God's sake, our kids shouldn't know that there is someone lying and receiving for it, because we are going to be in really trouble with that. But this is the point. There's no more time to think, to wait for cooperation. I think that's the point. We need more. We need a good answer, and we need to think about on desmonetization. We need to think about transparency, and as soon as possible. And one of the good things of this ecosystem movement, we can say here, it's like how important every actor in this system to change. So everyone is here. Maybe you're going to write an article. Maybe you're going to talk with someone about climate disinformation. And this is something really powerful.
Thank you, Thais. Going from that, maybe I will ask Alex, because Alex had a press conference today and he talked a lot about advertising industry. So can you tell us more? Can you tell us what the role of the advertising industry in this work, and what are the problems there, and what we need to do to shape the ecosystem?
Absolutely, thank you. So, yeah, my other hat is working with the Conscious Advertising Network, and our work is around, I like to call it the kind of fair trade movement for advertising. You know, if you went back a few decades ago and you spoke to companies and said to them, you know, what is the pay like or conditions like in farms or factories who are producing your garments or food that you're selling, and they would have said, has nothing to do with us. That's, you know, further down the supply chain. We just know that we pay what we pay. And it's taken decades of work, decades of activism and grassroots movements and campaigning and legislation to get to a better point, nothing solved. but it's taken time to even enter that into the public consciousness. And I think with advertising, there's a similarity there, because it's really important to understand that there are systemic incentives that are in play when we're talking about these platforms that are typically the vehicles of misinformation, because advertising funds the internet, quite simply. If you look at Facebook, 2020 was 97.9% of their revenue came from advertising. Google around the same time, 80%. So there's an economic model at play in terms of your attention. They make more money if you spend 4 hours on it than 2 hours. They make more money depending on how you scroll or how you click onto the next video. And at the heart of that is attention, its scale, and its opacity. Scale is really important because, this is a gigantic industry. The advertising industry is expected to surpass 2025 next year. And apologies if any of you were in the press conference, because this is a little bit of repetition, but it's important to stress. That $1 trillion means that if you were to rank it amongst countries, according to the IMF and GDP, it would be the 20th biggest country here. If you just looked at digital advertising, it would slip down to 23rd and only be bigger than Belgium. But that's a massive amount. And so it's a significant issue that we have, that there's opaque systems here, that when we're talking about, algorithms, we don't know what's behind them. We know that they supercharge misinformation. We know that in moments of emergency events that, fear and misinformation travels faster than fact. But there's money at play behind that, because the longer that you're looking at that content, the longer that you're staying on those platforms, the more that's impacting. So advertising plays a massive role in this, and there's lots of things that advertisers can be doing, and there's lots of things that legislators can be thinking about as well with an industry of this size. But I don't know whether I should go on to, should I go into that right now?
Maybe later.
Maybe later. I feel like I've spoken a lot there.
We leave Alex,
Yeah.
he can talk 2 days about
Yeah.
advertising and the...
That's the issue.
Yeah.
I'll leave you hanging
Yeah.
for the solutions.
I will, from there, you mentioned about advertising and digital platforms. That's why I would like to ask Martin and Lilium about how do you plan to involve the actors who are currently part of the problem, and then make sure that they become part of the solution rather than problem. How this initiative, I know it is a tough question, and this is a question we have been trying to answer for a long time, but I would love to hear your thoughts about whether you plan to engage with the tech platforms, or you already engaging with them, or advertisers and so on.
I can try to take a stab at this. We have in the global principles for information integrity some specific asks to the tech platforms, to the digital platforms, and that is, as Alex also mentioned, to disincentivize online harm, meaning really discouraging business models that profit from spreading harmful disinformation. So it's really about getting platforms to come up with alternative revenue streams and models that have sort of a culture of innovation and safety and privacy, and not monetizing harm. So that's one call to the platforms that we make to them whenever we interact with them. The other one is also what Alex explained, is the transparency. We need to know better how their algorithms work, how these fake news, how it spreads, how it becomes so viral. And they need to give access to researchers to get access to that data, to have more insights into how this problem works, so we can figure out how to solve it. So those are two key asks, I think, that we will always keep emphasizing in our interactions with the platforms.
Thank you. Lilium, do you want to say?
I would just add that this is a momentous and very heated subject in Brazil because of the work of the justice system. I see some Brazilian journalists here, but the others I don't know if they are aware. But a judge from the Supreme Court in Brazil shut down the X platform for several days or weeks because the platform didn't comply to the Supreme Court orders. Didn't pay fines, didn't shut down accounts that were promoting violent acts in the political realm. So there was this decision from a judge, and the platform was shut down. Then the platform decided to pay the fines, very expensive ones. And also there is a law in Brazil saying that to operate in the country, digital platforms must have an office and a legal representative, someone who can respond to the law. The law is a rule of law system, and we have laws, and everybody has to follow the same laws. So this specific platform had closed their office. They had no legal representative. They could not be reached by justice, so they were shut down. Was a turmoil. And so in our case, justice is doing their part. They're applying the laws. And the message for Brazilian society is that nobody, Brazilian or non-Brazilian, no matter how powerful the person is above the law.
Thank you. That is one of the things, actually, one of the things that many tech advocates and climate organizations defend, that these platforms are acting beyond above the law and they should be accountable. I will return the question to elephant in the room. We talked about the platforms. We talked about how governments are studying this issue. Last question, and maybe I will leave the room to questions from the audience. How about the fossil fuel industry? What do you think about what they do in the information ecosystem, and what do we need to do to prevent the pollution, if there is, coming from them? Maybe we can start from our civil society representatives and then give the floor to other speakers if they want.
So I'm going to remember something that we heard from Antonio Guterres. Just said that the fossil fuel industry is the new tobacco industry. And that's why I call it the supply chain of lies, because we need to understand that it's a system designed not just you don't believe about climate change or initiatives, but to postpone climate action. And the way we are now, we are like giving money and influence and political space for just kinds of professional disinformers. I now named them with a special names. I think it's like important to understand that it's not about fake news. It's something much bigger than that. And we are talking about the fossil fuels. This is the scenario, the new tobacco industry. And I think like it's something like really important here for us to understand that it's like, it's not about opinion, because sometimes when talking about climate acceleration, someone says to you like, oh, it's your opinion. No, we are talking about data, we are talking about the research of important scientists, we are talking about IPCC. So this is the scenario that we are living. And in Brazil, we had an important, and a recently big case where a scientist that also works as an influencer, she worked, that was a great force against disinformation during pandemic. He became part of publicity with a fossil fuel company. And it was like a strike for the Democratic camp, especially because he is someone that people believe. And many times when you see there's new voices, because we are like talking here about the platforms, but we need to talk about also the people that are working. We see influencers, we follow them. So it's important to talk about media literacy. And one of the things like canceling the influences is not the answer. The answer is changing the supply chain of lies. So that's the message I'd like to share with you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'll probably speak a little bit from my Conscious Advertising Network hat, but we have 7 different manifestos or blueprints that we give to advertisers, and we say, you should abide by these quite basic concepts, hopefully, in terms of how you can improve your supply chain, how you can make sure that you're not contributing to the worst forms of harm for society. And one of those is around climate and sustainability. And so advertisers who sign up to this, we have over 200 members, are agreeing to be working on things like, tackling greenwashing and making sure that their adverts are accurate in what they're putting forward. So obviously, we also have another one on mis and disinformation, so it covers that there as well. But advertising plays a really big part in how the fossil fuel industry kind of continues. And I think if we look around these beautiful images that are kind of adorned around this wall, I'm sure you could all imagine if we changed the words in the logo, you've probably all seen fossil fuel ads that look very similar with those images, just with a different name and logo to it. Maybe not the one that shows people underwater, but I'm sure at times that might be more fitting. But so I think it's really important, that kind of accuracy side. And I think it's a really important message for advertisers when thinking about the clients that they're working with, is to think about the accuracy in the information that they're providing. We don't tell organizations who they can and cannot work with, but what we do say is how you are contributing to the information ecosystem and whether or not you are misleading people. And I think that's really, really critical when we're talking about this.
Yeah, and our Secretary General has not been shy about calling out the role of the fossil fuel industry. And when we're talking about coordinated disinformation campaigns, we are, of course, mostly talking about coordinated disinformation campaigns funded by the fossil fuel industry. They have the billions of dollars that they have been putting behind these disinformation efforts for decades. And it's not just the industry itself, it's also they're enablers, right? And amongst the key enablers are the PR and advertising industry. And that's why the Secretary General in June has made this call on advertising companies and PR companies to drop their fossil fuel clients and not take on any new ones. He's also called on tech and media to stop taking fossil fuel advertising money. And he's even called on governments to also put in place a fossil fuel ad ban. All that is because that is the enabling industry that gets the message across. So that's what we're up against. It's quite a formidable opponent. But we will, with our partners, keep up the fight.
Thank you. I remember the word he was using was madman fueling madness, right? Is there any other questions? Any questions from the room?
So thank you for this great panel. I'm very happy to be here and to listen to you all. My question is, today we have this very complex disinformation ecosystem, which of course involves social networks. And yes, we see those big fake news, weird or awkward information circulating, but we also have research institutions, newspapers, printed newspapers, academia, consultation offices that spread this information by fragmenting the information and showing this very little slice of information that, by not showing the context, may come to actually be interpreted in a very biased and a weird, that's the word I can think of right now, way, right? So are you also talking about those very different ways of spreading disinformation through the initiative or other ongoing initiatives? I think this is very important for us to get in the conversation. And last comment, it feels also important that we do not target one specific audience like IPLCs, because in fact we are all subjected to this information. So we must say, like, you see that scholared people are also subjected to this information.
Thank you. Can you let us know if your question is for one specific speaker or all of them?
For the table,
Okay.
whomever wants to answer, thank you.
So I think the first important thing, it's like calling climate information and understanding how it works. So CAD has a document telling what's in climate information, what are the types, and even how you as an organization or a person, you can combat climate information and misinformation. So we are like translated this document, and we are going to have all the in Portuguese soon in our website. So I'm really happy to share. The second thing, and it's really important, it's like all of us are impacted by misinformation. We are the victims, and it's really important to understand you as a victim of this process, because when you're a victim of, for example, of a fraud, you're going to ask for your rights. But as the way we are here, we are not asking for our rights, and even for our children's rights. So this is something like really important, and I think it's like for us especially, it's something like that counts a lot. And another thing that I'd like to share with you, that we are going to launch this year Climate Information Observatory, focus on climate and social environmental issues in hate speech in Brazil. So soon we are going to have news to share.
Yeah, I think a really important part of this is, I think there's often a question of freedom of speech, and I think it's really important to say that everyone has the entitlement to freedom of speech, but what we're often talking about here is the fact that it does not mean that you should have freedom of reach, and that your voice should be unhealthily amplified. That your voice should be unhealthily amplified, and that's a big part of the problem. So when we're looking at this, and particularly because in terms of that advertising side, it's not just that it can be very lucrative for the platforms, it can be really lucrative for the actors as well, the proponents of false information. It can make you a lot of money if you've got adverts on your website, or in the case of some platforms, you can be paid directly in terms of engagement on it. So I think it's to say that we actually, we need to understand what's behind the algorithms, what's going on there, and to be looking at the kind of perverse incentives that are often at play. And so when we're looking across this, it's not saying, it's not just saying, we want to take down everything that we don't agree with. It's not at all that. It's saying that actually there has to be consequences at times for freedom of speech. There always has been, and that we want to make sure that we are not just boosting kind of content which can be really, really damaging. And I think a really honest conversation about that is really integral to that.
Thank you very much for all your speeches. I have two very brief questions. One of them is you mentioned having reached out to big tech companies, or making a call to them. What has been their response? And also to the Brazilian delegate, does Brazil have a plan to ban fossil fuels in line with the UN Secretary General's recommendation? Thank you.
Fossil fuels or fossil fuel ads?
In terms of the response, I think it's an ongoing discussion. Yeah, there's not much I can say at this point. Our principles only came out in June, so it hasn't been a very long time yet. But the discussion continues for sure, and we keep pressing on that.
The question is whether Brazil intends to ban fossil fuels ads. I don't have the answer. What I can tell you that, as I understand, that the advertising industry in Brazil, it's like self-regulated. They have their own regulations that they provide themselves to try to organize their area. So there is not a law. No, that it's something bottom-up, industry-led self-regulation, as I understand. And I don't know if they intend to ban this, but I think as was compared to the tobacco industry, to the to the safety in transport. Some decades ago, nobody used safe belts, and now you cannot go into a car without seat belts. It's the same kind of thing. Society will have to understand the changes, understand what's coming, and adapt and change behavior. So it's something that will come naturally sooner or later.
Hi. Are you listening? Yeah. Well, I have another question, which is probably another elephant in the room, and people usually don't talk about it because we usually focus on the industry of disinformation. But there is another aspect of disinformation, which is how do we connect the discourse of real information? Because the industry of disinformation has been very successful in pass simple messages that they captivate people. There is actually a study made by MIT, I think it was years ago when Trump was elected for the first time. I hate to say that, but when he was elected for the first time. And back then, they actually went through Twitter, and they realized that when it comes to people share a lot of more disinformation than real information. And why is that? Well, there's a lot of studies showing how the messages that come from disinformation, they are very simple, very direct, and people like that. People like to have simple solutions to difficult problems. They don't like, and actually science is very complex, and the climate change science is very complex. So I would like to ask you if you already thought about this, and if you're already thinking about ways to implement strategies to connect people to the real content.
Can I use my moderator rights and try to answer this question? This is my view. This is my personal view. I am spending my life in last 10 years on strategic communications. I really hate this question saying that climate communication, people are not communicating well. I don't agree with you. We do communicate well. But the budget side, the ecosystem, look at that. Last year, Shell spent $250 million in digital ads in the US. I know the climate sector and climate communication spendings. I have an idea, and it is not that amount, half of or 1/10 of that amount. We do communicate very well, but this is not about communicating what is true. This is about silencing the amplification of lies. They spend money. They spend huge monies. And if the sector is like that, doesn't matter how much you better communicate. Every country has a communication department, and every communication person I know in climate space are great communicators. It's not about bad communication. It's about system that silences communication. That's why I think this question starts from dealing with the fossil fuel industry and their megaphones, not starts from changing the way of communications. Of course, there are things we can do. Of course, things we can improve. We are under capacity. We do deal with a lot of stuff. But at the same time, look at the pavilions. There are more pavilions in a couple of places there that are representing, I don't know, climate offenders. So it is about the space. Who do we give the space? It's not about us communicating bad.
Oh, I'd like to think a little bit because the way we communicate changed a lot, and the old answers they don't work anymore. So if your son gets information on TikTok and you are writing, publishing articles, it's not the connection. So at Fala, we are always thinking about how you communicate better with each audience. And for example, last year we launched a program, a humor show to combat disinformation on YouTube. So we created the monitoring, and with the monitoring we did the investigations, and with the investigations we created a community on Instagram to combat climate information with humor, and then you use the material to create a program on YouTube, and in 5 months, organically, we reach 1.5 million views. So I do think that you can create other ways, and we needed to test more, which means that everyone who works with climate and communication should be looking for this and for the way the new generation consumes information to try to talk with them. And there's another thing that's particular to Brazil. For example, in many places, you don't have Wi-Fi. So people are not there to get the information. So you need to understand how do they use communication and how they understand what you say, because it's like completely different. What you say is going to be understood in another way. And we created 2 years ago a podcast that was spread from the north of Amazon in 300 indigenous communities. So the indigenous communicators did the podcast and then they shared with their communities. So it's something like creating inspiration inside the territories. The solutions are in the territories. We need to work together.
I want to just add a word from the UN side, but you are right, we're dealing with very technical language often. If you look at the IPCC reports, there are thousands of pages. My job in the communications department with my colleagues who are here, by the way, is often to translate that into something a normal person can understand, right? So we try our hardest to communicate in a way that everybody can understand and to simplify the scientific findings. And we use our social media platforms, our websites, to really explain the issues. We see a huge demand for a kind of explainer content, like what is climate change, what is renewable energy, what are the causes and the effects of climate change. Those are like some of our most popular web pages, actually. So we really try to more and more, not talk about 1.5, but talk about preserving a livable planet, or not talk about CO2 equivalent, but just say pollution. We are getting better at it, I think, and then together with the systemic changes, as Devin says, very importantly, hopefully that will, we will be able to break through.
I think there's another way that the climate movement has its kind of hand behind its back, and I think you almost hit on it there, and it is integrity. And disinformation actors don't have to do that. And it's a lot easier to test what goes viral and to test what lands when you don't have to care about being accurate. Whereas the UN, WWF, so many different organizations, that integrity is so key to everything that they do. And even when they're doing it right, they still get undermined often because of things like disinformation or just headlines in general. And so I think, I did think that I had an answer to that. I hope there's an answer to that. I think there is luckily some answers. One thing is, I think on that transparency piece, it's transparency around how those algorithms work and how moderation works as well. So why is it that sometimes disinformation is, taken down and sometimes it isn't? So actually understanding what's behind that. I think it's around, it is around things like supporting media literacy. It is around things like trying to understand around the framing, like what does connect, what does work. And I had it and then it's gone again. Oh no, it's been a long day. I'm really sorry. I will try and come back to that. I may have to hunt you down and talk to you after, but I promise there is something out there.
Yes, I think your question touched on a very important point. That's the content of the message. because it's true that the science behind climate change is extremely complex. It's complex for us that study and read the length IPCC reports. It's a scientific language. It's very hard to translate. And when people don't understand what is at stake or don't understand what is being communicated, they are against it. You know, they don't engage. They think they will push aside. And this is a real problem as the UN is trying to simplify the message. And I will give you an example. When we had these floods in the south of Brazil last May, suddenly all the country was talking about climate change and floods and why they were not prepared and early warnings. And then the scientists were on TV every night. And they were really scary. They were saying things like, we overshoot, this 1.5 goal is no longer possible. We are suffering the historical concentration of green gas houses in the atmosphere. It will only get worse. Everybody's going to die. Be prepared, buy your boats, restore food. Was really terrible. And then one science said, and you know what's the worst? We are not going to die because of flooding. We are going to die because of heat waves. Our body will collapse. And this is, prime time television, 60 million, 70 million people watching. So it's normally that, the audience is scared. So we have to find the right tone to the message regarding climate change. Otherwise, we will scare and push public they won't believe it because they don't want to believe they want that they will die and that the world is finished because we overshoot it.
Can I?
Alex, actually, I was reminded that we are over our time. So if it's okay, we can have the questions. We can spend time around here. I would love to, because they kept putting the science, and I would like to respect that. So before closing, thank you very much, not only for joining and spending an hour here, but also the initiative. I know this initiative is a really good starting point, and we hope that we will fight. We will win the battle against disinformation as we try to win the battle against climate change. Thank you very much.